that no greater lie has ever been told about Apple than the fact that they are a monopoly. Okay, for one, the iPod and iPhone isn't your only choice. If you don't like the way Apple does things, you have hundreds of choices on the market. You don't have to use iTunes either. There's hundreds of applications that do what iTunes does. Okay? If you don't like the way Apple runs their show, then don't buy tickets to the show. A monopoly is when you're the only one out there and there's nobody else, and you're impeding everybody else from competing with you, basically. Like AT&T was back in the day when they owned all the phone lines. The government broke them up into different Bell companies, okay, because they owned all the phone lines and they wasn't selling them to people to create any competition. AT&T still owned the phone lines, but the government stepped in and made them start selling the phone lines to other people. Now this isn't the same thing. There is a slew of music services, a slew of music players, and a slew of cell phones for you to choose from. It's not like Apple is the only one you have and you're like, I don't like this because Apple's making me do it this way. If you don't like it done that way, you buy another cell phone. How about you people who are griping about Apple having a monopoly? How about you get on the Windows for a second? I mean, they own 90% of the desktop market. Is that a monopoly? Why isn't it? Because you have a choice of other operating systems, right? But Microsoft got in trouble not only for bundling Internet Explorer, but if you was to buy a PC, you had no choice. You got a PC with Windows on it. That was it. You didn't get a chance to source your own operating system. They didn't sell you a computer with nothing on it and you went out and sourced your own OS. No. Windows was put on every single PC back in the day from the beginning, whether there was DOS or Mac. I mean, it don't matter. They forced Windows down PC users' throats. That's more of an example of a monopoly than what Apple's doing. If you didn't like what Windows was doing, what choice did you have? Go buy a Mac? There was no other choice. Now you can go to Dell and get computers with Linux and stuff. And but I don't see why you're all thinking that you have the right to have this, that, or the other, or Apple is wrong for not opening up their platform to other people, not letting other people sell iPhone apps. You know, Apple can quality control these apps. They go through them, they see if they're up to par, and they can keep them on par with the Apple experience. If they let anybody start throwing out applications for the iPod, you're going to get applications that suck, that crash, that lock it, that are just put together just to get 2 cents. You know, Apple just breaks even on the App Store. The developers still make the most money. All of this whole argument about this is crap. The FCC has no right to come in and say, Apple, you have to sell this. You know, they don't go to Chevron gas stations and say, you have to sell BP gas because these customers want it. Or they don't go to Ford and say, you have to sell Chevrolet engines as an option because customers want it. That's bullcrap. If you start getting into that, you're going to get into a lot of stuff that meets this monopolistic criteria that you all have. People want to say, well, it's like Apple trying to tell you what kind of gas you can put in your car. And that is not the same thing at all. On a broader scale, they do tell you what kind of gas you can put in your car. Diesel, unleaded. They don't specifically tell you what brand, but some cars are natural now, or you know, or some are electric. You know, I mean, they make you use electric if you have an electric car. They make you use unleaded if you have an unleaded gasoline car, or diesel if you have a diesel car. I mean, this is not a comparison, okay? You cannot say, well, why won't they let me put any kind of, well, it's like saying GM is telling me I can only put BP gas in my car, and no, it's not the same thing at all. And that to me sounds like you guys are grasping at straws. Let me read you a few letters here that I've got. This says here, as for a whole monopoly argument, it was Microsoft who had every single computer company putting its browser and operating system on every computer made. It was hard for an ordinary, competent computer user to find or reprogram a computer to use any other operating system. What this meant was that the computer buyers were forced to buy a computer that ran Windows. The alternative was to buy a Mac. Precisely because Apple makes their own proprietary hardware. Apple went through that period in the 90s when it allowed other hardware manufacturers to install their OS. At the time, people thought it made sense, but in retrospect, I think Apple did the right thing by canning the experiment. And that's all it was, an experiment. Enjoy your Microsoft world. You're number one, you know? At least when it comes to computer operating system and lots of other software. Besides, so much of the criticism I see of Apple comes off as whining due to their success with the iPod and iPhone. No one has forced you or anyone else to buy an Apple product. There are many computers, MP3 players, smartphones out there made by different companies running various operating systems, and you can now download music from many sites, not just iTunes. Apple is not a monopoly. It's just because you whiners see how good the iPhone is, and you want to be able to get your piece of the pie too without Apple telling you this, that, or the other, without Apple approving your app. You just want to be able to sell an iPhone app right off your website without Apple's okay, put anything in it, make porn apps be prevalent. If, you know, it just makes no sense. Windows is going to open up a store. They got the Zune store. The Palm's got an app store. BlackBerry's got an app store. So I want to hear you all complaining about them having BlackBerry apps only work on the BlackBerry stuff, right? Or the, what was the other store? The Palm store? That ain't going to work on iPhones, is it? Well, why not? If Apple has to make its apps work on other phones and let anybody who wants to make an app, then why don't the same thing apply to the other app stores? You're all a bunch of hypocrites. Let's see if there's anything else that I want to read to you guys. Here. Okay. You believe that Apple should completely destroy its business model because you're aggravated and upset. You can see that you're on, it says here, he can see that these people complaining are of the information want to be free crowd. Okay? So please allow me to correct a fundamental misconception you have. Information access is not a right. It's a privilege. And if you value your privacy, as I do, the last thing I want is unfettered access to all intellectual property. A perfect case in point. Recently, an executive of Twitter had his computer hacked and confidential information about the company was stolen. But Michael Arrington, publisher of a blog site, TechCrunch, decided that he had the divine right to publish stolen and confidential information about a private company. When he announced he would do so, the protests have been justifiably blowing up. Apple has invested millions of dollars to develop and market iTunes and the iTunes App Store. It took years of research, programming, testing, innovation, marketing, advertising, and diligent negotiations with content holders to achieve this. So what gives any competitor a divine right to barge in, use a cheap and deceitful trick to do a hardware hack to allow a Palm or any other device to access iTunes? They don't. And it should be no surprise that Apple would move decisively to protect its investment, its contractual relations with content holders, and Apple's intellectual property. Let me put it this way. If you believe that Apple should just open up everything and hope for the best, I suggest you simply remove the front door of your home. Then invite a bunch of deadhead stoners from a Fish concert to come over. Now, if you think there's a difference in forcing Apple to open its front door than forcing you to open your front door, you're wrong. It's obviously that you have no real-world experience in business. Apple has earned its success. It basically bet the company's future to build the iPod, iTunes, and the iTunes Store. All this could have failed, but you apparently believe that success should be punished. If that is true, we will never agree with each other. You can't have it both ways, and information is not always free. If a company has no right to protect the intellectual property, we are no longer a republic beholden to the rule of law. I mean, the guy makes a point. Sometimes he can be a little extreme here, but forcing Apple to do things just because you think you should have the right to do it too is, how arrogant are you? How arrogant are you? I mean, if Apple has to open its doors and let everybody make iPhone apps and let everybody sell iPhone apps and let all music players work with the iTunes Store and all cell phones work with the App Store, then I want to see the same thing happening with everybody. It sounds like to me we just got a bunch of bitter Apple haters who are spreading FUD. It's a pointless argument. It's stupid, and anybody who thinks that they have a right to the features and apps that the iPhone has without having to use iTunes or the iPhone, you're wrong. People say, well, you know, if it wasn't for iTunes on Windows, what would you be? You know what? Well, then let Apple remove iTunes from Windows. Then where would you be? They might take a massive hit, but they'd still be around. You know, they could just take that shit all away altogether and just leave it to Mac. It's the same thing with OS X. They ain't gonna free that either. Apple maintains a tight, diligent ship, and it guarantees a certain experience. And anybody who's claiming monopoly or foul is just bitter, angry users that are envious of Apple products. On one final note, Microsoft owns 90% of the desktop market, okay? So if you want any of Microsoft technology, you're going to have to get Microsoft operating system. And since they own 90% of the market, what if you want to use Surface technology on your Mac? Should they be made to open up their technology and give it to everybody else just because we want it and they are almost a monopoly? Your arguments are weak and have holes in them. Sorry guys, OS X.